Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jasched. I am your host, as usual, Jess. Before we get into today's conversation, I do just want to remind you my book, Leaders Who Thrive, comes out next month, which is wild, if you ask me. Very exciting, but wild. So that is available for adding to your wish list or pre-ordering, depending on where you get it from at this point. So I will include the link below that you can follow and or go to and select your online retailer of choice and add it to that wish list or pre-order now because it comes out end of September. So that's going to be there. And the other reminder is the Get Jasched Meditation Plus subscription podcast is still there and still available for you to subscribe to. It is attached to this podcast, but while this podcast remains free to access, the Meditation Plus podcast is as little as $7 US a month. That's just because I can't change the currency on the platform, but $7 US a month, and you get access to new weekly guided meditation and mindfulness practices, including the existing library from when I started that part. So when I started the Meditation Plus podcast up until now, and new weekly episodes or practices coming out, you get access to that for that monthly subscription. I'll include that link below too. So let's get into it. Today, look, mindfulness, we're just going to dive right in. Mindfulness has a lot of misconceptions around it. I was going to say it gets a bit of a bad rap. It does in some ways, but it is misunderstood in a lot of ways as far as a simple word goes. So a lot of the misconceptions, especially the one in particular we're talking about today, is the misunderstanding around mindfulness and the expectation that it means to be calm. So sometimes we kind of use mindfulness interchangeably as a word, and we mean calm when we say mindful. And I say we, not me anymore, but we, the royal we, uses calm instead of mindful, or mindful instead of calm. We mean, it means I have to be calm, I have to be this, I have to be that. And it's just not true. And the reason I feel so strongly about this is because I think it gets in the way of people actually practicing mindfulness or getting to experience their own benefits of mindfulness if they keep positioning themselves with the expectation or with the pressure of, well, I need to be calm, I need to be calm, I need to be calm. That's the quickest way to gaslight yourself about it, and it's just not useful. And if you approach mindfulness with the expectation that it means calmness, it also sets you up for failure. So there is a massive, massive difference. And I want this conversation in this particular episode to help you to dispel some of that difference, because it is an important distinction to make and to understand when we approach mindfulness as a concept and as a practice for ourselves personally, but also in organizations, whether it's businesses or sports or wherever it is, also in those areas. So I want you to I want you to sort of consider that even though, thanks to social media, look, we do have a lot. I say this so hesitantly because I don't fully mean it in every context, but there's a lot of good things about social media. Let's put it that way. There's a lot to be said about the benefits of social media in normalizing a lot of conversations that were really hard to normalize before, that were really hard to have before. And having said that, there is also a lot about social media that has a lot to answer for. And mindfulness has been marketed in a lot of ways on the various socials, not everyone's obviously, but on the various socials, it has been marketed as, oh, well, I'm sitting quietly, or I've gone on a hike and I'm sitting at the top of this mountain with this view, and that's me automatically being mindful. There's a practice in there, but that's not it. Or it's been marketed as emptying your mind. You must have an empty mind. Quote, you must have an empty mind or a quiet mind in order to experience mindfulness, in order to be mindful. And that's just not the truth. And the marketing of you have to feel peaceful is just a fucking lie. It truly is. So this idea that we have to be calm all of the time, or that we can never get rattled, or that we can never show emotions, we can never emote, otherwise we're not being mindful, can fuck right off and stop holding people back. I mean, there's a lot of genderedness around that. As a woman, you experience a lot as a woman in general over the course of your life, being told that it's unbecoming for a lady to have emotions, or you're not allowed to speak up, or you're not allowed to show anger or displeasure at something, or whatever it is, right? So I can speak to that angle, but I think in general it just holds people back. It holds men and boys back too, because, unfortunately, under the society in which we exist, under this patriarchal society in which we exist, it harms men and boys too, because they are told that you're not allowed to have emotions, you're not allowed to show emotions, but anger is the emotion you're allowed to show, which is interesting because anger is actually like the my understanding of it's the most uncontrolled emotion, at risk of being uncontrolled, but it's a valid emotion. But this pressure of needing to be calm, and if you're not calm, or if you have emotions, then you're not being mindful, is damaging to all of us in some way, in multiple ways sometimes, but in some way, right? So when we consider the difference between what calm is and what mindfulness is, I'm going to say it straight, and then I'm going to obviously do my Jess thing and go into the conversation around it. So calm is an emotional state, or a psychological state, or a physiological state. Calm is that state of being, whether it's got to do with your emotions, with your mental state, your psychological state, your physiological state. Calm is a state of being, right? Cool. Mindfulness is not the state of being. Mindfulness is being aware of your present moment experience with more intention, and maybe even therefore less judgment. But mindfulness is being aware of your present moment experience and then choosing what you do with that intentionally. Notice that it's adjacent to your state, but it actually has nothing to do with what state that is in. You can be angry, you can be feeling angry, and be mindful still, because you are aware that you are feeling experiences of anger, and then you are able to then intentionally choose what you do with that anger, instead of letting it consume you or flood you or take over, right? That's the simplified way of explaining it. So it's acknowledging that you feel angry instead of acting on it necessarily. You can choose how you respond to it, which could still be an action, but it might not just be the reaction. So that's really the distinction, and it's a distinction between the two, and it's really, really important because we are all going to have moments in our life where we feel something. I say all. Yes, there are certain psychological conditions, like psychopathy and things like that. But like if you're listening to this podcast, you're likely not that. Because if you're listening to this podcast, you are likely interested in understanding yourself. So, and capable of self-reflection. So, we are all, in general, going to feel an experience of emotion at some point. And not all of that is going to be pleasant emotion or enjoyable emotion or even what we might call useful emotion in the work context, right? And if we think about and this is about leadership, this is, this my whole work is about how we are at work and how we lead, right? So if we think about it from that perspective, from leaders, from workplace, whether you are a leader or not, just that workplace experience, because it is in some ways a universal experience, we are going to experience frustration. There are going to be people around us that frustrate us, or circumstances that frustrate us that are beyond our control. We are going to feel pressure, whether it's a time pressure, an expectation pressure, a deliberate pressure, a pressure of the role, a pressure because we care, a pressure, right? We're always going to experience some kind of pressure at some point. Uncertainty, disappointment, conflict, especially when there's other people involved, but it doesn't have to be. We can have internal conflict too. We can feel fear. We can feel urgency. Again, whether it's manufactured, our own or someone else's. We can feel tension, mostly interpersonal tension as well, which is the whole point of having these conversations. We are going to come across difficult decisions to make, all of these things, right? And there's this expectation. There's this expectation that leaders must appear calm. And I paused when I started that sentence initially because some leaders just don't give a shit about that expectation. Some get off on being the volatile kind of person, the volatile kind of leader, creating fear, all of that bullshit, right? And it is bullshit. It truly, truly is. But generally speaking, leaders are expected to appear calm at all times, which in some instances, yes, is useful depending on the scenario or the circumstance, right? When there are lives on the line, or when, when they are trying to set an example of how to manage something. Yes, there's so much nuance here, right? But the risk is sometimes in the attempt to appear calm all of the time, there is this actual experience of just suppressing shit, of just not actually dealing with shit, not actually acknowledging shit, and not actually leading well in that way. And I say that because you can be a good leader still, but there can still be a better way to communicate instead of just trying to be calm at all costs, right? So the issue is when leaders kind of try to pretend that there isn't something to be stressful about, to the point where they are not acknowledging their own experiences, their own stress or their own whatever, whether it's work related, personal related, got nothing to do with the issue at hand or the conversation at hand, whatever it is. The issue is when leaders suppress that even from themselves, then they're not dealing with it. And I'm not going into like the psychology or therapy element, but genuinely just not acknowledging, hey, maybe we're overworked. For a very basic example, maybe we're overworked. If you're a leader and you have a team where you included and your team are understaffed because you are trying so hard to play calm that you're not actually advocating for you or your team's needs to maybe the higher ups, the bean counters, the people who allocate the budget. So they don't actually allocate a budget for extra staffing for you and your department or your team, for example, that is to your detriment. And then you keep feeling more stressed and more stressed, for example. Or more internally, if you have shit going on at home, which a lot of us do at different times, because guess what? We're human, and you aren't acknowledging it, but it's still creeping out in how you communicate, because my whole entire business, the whole crux of it is, how do we communicate at work when we are stressed? Because most of the time, we communicate really poorly when we're stressed. But when we are able to practice mindfulness, we don't have to be calm, but when we're able to practice mindfulness, we are able to communicate a little bit better in more useful ways. So it is really important to consider all of this when you are assessing calm versus mindfulness versus how am I showing up at work. But mostly those first two, and then how are you showing up anywhere? Mostly those first two. Calm versus mindfulness. Just because you are calm doesn't automatically mean that you are practicing mindfulness or that you are being a mindful person or a mindful leader. It's just not it's a false equivalency. It doesn't mean the other is happening. Just because you are being a mindful leader, or maybe not just because, I don't really want to, it's not the same, but if you are being a mindful leader, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to look calm or appear calm. Sometimes you can. Sometimes it's useful. Sometimes you have a talent of doing it. Sometimes it's a skill that you build, right? And it's also a false equivalence. It doesn't mean the same thing. So if your focus, let me put it this way, if your focus in your workplace is to emphasize the importance of being calm at all costs without the skill set of mindfulness developed to support you, then you are not prioritizing the thing you think you're prioritizing. And it's not the most effective thing either. It's just not. So if your emphasis is on calm, that doesn't always make for the best decisions under pressure. Sometimes, sure. Depends. Depends on the mindfulness practice of, or behavior of, the people involved, even when they are under pressure. But if that's your emphasis, if that's your mandate, you're not actually doing anything about it to support them in that. You're prioritizing the wrong thing because you have an idea of what it means or what you think it means, and it's just not it. It's just not it. So really, really consider, if you prioritize mindful behavior, let's say, it's a practice, it's a behavior. If you encourage mindful behavior first, you will have a much more effective team. Like you'll have a much more effective group of people making decisions or leading the way or helping to lead or manage others or whatever it is. They'll be a lot more effective because they are supported in you emphasizing mindful behavior, and you'll have a lot more robust, helpful communication that actually moves things forward, instead of just the I'm fine, I'm calm, I'm fine, I'm calm, I'm fine, I'm calm, but never actually saying the thing or demonstrating why something is important enough, or showing sometimes this is overwhelming, or whatever the thing is, this is overwhelming, I need more, I need whatever it is, right? So you need to allow people the room to be human enough to still express themselves, because when they are doing so mindfully, they are more likely to express themselves with impact, a positive impact, effectiveness, with moving forward, with working through the challenges, through the roadblocks, through whatever it is. It's instead of just staying in the status quo of, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And it's just like that meme of the dog drinking coffee inside a burning house. Is it fine? Or do we need to actually acknowledge things? And I've never been one in any workplace, in any role I have ever had, never been one to just not acknowledge the truth of something. And that has been, I was going to say, that's not been dependent on the role I have either. I've done that in roles that did not hold authority, and that wasn't always embraced, but they just continued as they did even after I left, and it didn't continue working to not acknowledge the things. So mindfulness is not pretending to be calm or just showing calm. It's not a state of being. You can practice mindfulness and not feel calm, but maybe feel a bit clearer, at least about what is going on. You're acknowledging what is there, what is going on, and that is the difference. So all of that being said, please understand from this conversation, from this episode, there is a difference between calm and mindfulness. And if you are only prioritizing calm, but you're not actually practicing mindful, I keep saying practice because it is a practice, you've got to practice, but then also demonstrating mindful behavior, especially at work, especially as a leader, but in any scenario in which you exist with other people, so everywhere. If you're not actually doing that, but you think you're doing the thing because you're being calm, then you're doing yourself a disservice. So mindfulness is not the same as calm. You don't require to be calm in order to demonstrate that you are being mindful. Really let yourself kind of sit with that difference between the two. There is a big difference. And of course, if you would like support, whether it's one-on-one or for your team, for your organization as a whole, I focus on leader-led support. So that means we still focus on leadership development, coaching, support, strategy, all of those things. It just depends on how much you want to involve me for it to trickle down into your team or organization or not. Please reach out. You can we can book a time for a call to just discuss what that is, but also what's going on for you, so I can understand more of that too. But please reach out. There are spaces available for that if it suits you, and you can find out if it suits you once we have that conversation. But otherwise, take this with you. Keep it in mind. You're not doing a bad job, but just make sure you're focusing on the right things, and I'll see you next time.